Hi, my name is Soile, and you're listening to Heartland, a fan podcast from a fan perspective. Wow, what an episode. Another very strong episode this past Sunday. I think a lot of people like this, and it did make me feel like those early years where we had guest stars and the Dude Ranch kind of storyline and Amy helping a horse. And I felt like I was part of the experience. Not sure how else explain that, but I think you know what I mean. Thanks for all the comments you've written under my Instagram post, and I read them all, and I pretty much agree with everything you all said. So why don't we just get started with reading them, and I'll just make small comments here and there about my thoughts. So the first comment comes from MC Loves Heartland. I love this episode. It's probably one of my favorites this season. I liked how it was centered more on side characters who may or may not show up again. It was a really interesting story, unlike anything they've done. The new story at the very beginning looked so real, it made me wonder if there actually was a big flood in Roseville. I loved how family came together to help the evacuees. The Fleming Bartlett family is a prominent family in the town, and they used what they had and their position in a great way. Lisa really stepped up to help, and I like seeing this part of her. I mean, she was the one who suggested to use the Dude Ranch as a way to house the evacuees. I loved getting to know Henry and the couple who stayed in the loft. It reminded me of the way the earlier episodes with Dude Ranch guests were, how they would delve deep into characters we might not see again, but use their story in a beautiful way. I was able to really feel for those characters. I was close to crying at some points at the episode just because of how well written it was and how realistic it seemed. It was interesting seeing how Biscuit clung to Remy because he was missing Winston. That was a great touch. I love the Katie and Rick scenes, especially seeing how close Bay and Aiden are. It was nice to see. The Tim and Henry storyline was really good. It was the perfect way to go into the next episode and Shane's storyline. I loved it so much. This is pretty much what I thought. I think it was interesting the way everyone helped in their own way. Like we had Lisa, who was immediately very hands-on and organizing and just had this like enormous amount of empathy for these people. And then we have Amy, working with Scott and other people to help the horses. And then we have, Katie and Parker and Maggie's wanting to do their part. And, Tim was there. And I feel like it was good to show that sometimes people don't really know what to do in situations like that and they need a little push, because I think Tim can be very caring, as it is shown in this episode, but I mostly think it's for his family. Like we see in this episode how Parker knows how to work on Tim to help Rick because she brings up Lou and immediately Tim's like, okay, I got this. So Parker knew his weak spot. And in this episode, we sort of see Tim kind of opening himself up, and we see him connect with this Henry guy in a very personal way. I thought it was lovely to see that, and I didn't expect it to tie with the Shane storyline, but I love the way they did it, and it just makes me very excited for next week's episode. Also, the way Jack dealt with this, he was mainly focused on the Lisa storyline, but also he's the guy who you talk to when you're having a crisis. And I think that showed again in this episode. And I don't know, I just love the balance between all the characters and how they came together, especially now when natural disasters are coming more and more common, I think people can relate to these storylines and get that kind of comfort and hope that, life will go on even though it seems devastating at the moment. Then the next comment comes from the story chemist. The indoor set lighting is getting worse by the episode. What is with that? Are they unaware of it, or are they trying to get some type of mood? The only type of mood they're getting from me is annoyed, as I'm struggling to view the characters clearly. Tim is no longer a supporting caricature of a character, and it's great to see him play his role with such aplomb. His character is actually dealing with his regrets, and I'm all for it because the others to me never will. He's the only one that experiences the consequences of his actions, not the audience righteous path, and tries to deal with it one way or another, but this one makes him so relatable. I really love his character for this reason, so refreshing from the rest. Was a little shocked at how much responsibility Katie and Parker had in helping all the evacuees. Is this realistic? I wish Rick was more hands-on at Maggie's and running the show instead of two teenagers. Having said that, Rick was amazing in his portrayal of the sidekick coming to the forefront, but needing to be convinced his place is not in the shadows. The evacuee couple had a good storyline, but the female character's acting was unfortunately very poor. You could see she was acting, and that put me off quite a bit. Amy's helping that traumatized horse in a jiffy is laughable and becoming so boring now. The acting of those Jack and Lisa scenes were amazing. They keep you riveted to the scene and made you feel what they were going through in that moment. I'm glad they both actually spoke about what was bothering them and talked it through a little instead just brushing it under the carpet and making it all Lisa's fault. ALA, Amy with Ty. I feel Jack takes Lisa for granted when she is around and doesn't care about her Fairfield or Stillman family priorities. Is it just me? Love your podcast, by the way. I look forward to them weekly. I sit down with a cup of coffee and relax as I watch it. It's my guilty pleasure. And then they continued, let's all be in agreement. Please, can we not ever see Lisa lifting a table again? The woman was going to hurt herself or fall over. Maybe both. Lisa is a blue blood, and certain things she just should not be doing. Yeah. That scene was funny, especially with her being like, Tim, come on. I like how even though Lisa's this, well, blue blood, rich person, whatever, she's still very grounded in this way. Like she's not waiting for someone to come and rescue her. She does that herself, and she loves to help others. So if she needs to lift a table, she's gonna lift a table because she's not shying away from getting her hands dirty. Yeah, I loved what you said about Tim. I mean, that's one of the reasons I love his character, because even though he's not perfect, I never want characters to be perfect. I just need them to be interesting and growing. So that's exactly why I love Tim, because you can see that he's growing, but the way he grows isn't that he changes as a person, like he would become unrecognizable, but more like we get to delve deeper into him and, unfold these layers of him. And it always makes sense. So yeah, I agree with everything you said about Tim. I love the couple that lived in the loft. I just can't imagine, like they probably had like a week worth of scenes, if that. And they're probably strangers. But they were convincing to me as a couple, and I love that they were very supportive of each other. And so when the other one was more down, the other one came to kind of lift him up, and vice versa. I actually enjoyed both of their performances, and I think they fit really well into the show. The natural way of living and seeing Heartland as an inspiration for what they want to do next. Yeah. As for those Jack and Lisa scenes, I agree with you as well. I was talking to Izzy about these scenes because obviously she was freaking out, but I think it's really telling that Sean has a background in stage work. He has that physical presence, but also he has experience in TV, so he can sell the face. And I think him having someone who is as skillful as Jessica Steen just like makes the scene so enjoyable to watch. So yeah, even though they were fighting, they were giving that like good stuff with their performances and showing these realistic situations and how couples act in those situations. So yeah, I really loved how heavily Lisa was involved. This episode really showed who she was, like her offering work for the couple, even though it wasn't exactly what they wanted, but it was like a lifeline. And then just like doing actually something, like not freezing in that moment. Please give us more Lisa storylines because they are always such a treat. As for your comment about the podcast, thank you very much. It's so strange to even think about people like building some kind of routine around the podcast because I don't see it. But it's nice to know that you guys have some kind of routine and you do little things while you're listening or watching because it's nice to kind of reach out to you through the screen, even though we're far away from each other. So yeah, that makes me really happy. Then we have a comment from Chris Tim Heartland. I think it was a great episode. My favorite part was when Tim was coaching Rick and was trying to boost his confidence. It was hilarious seeing Rick in a crisis situation. His facial expressions were beyond amusing, but loved how he nailed the speech with Tim's help, though. I want to see more of this duo. They were hysterical. The way Rick jumped from Lou's chair cracked me up. Rick should be very proud of himself for handling the situation perfectly. Chris and Aiden have a great chemistry on screen, and Aiden did a wonderful job with his character. Also loved how Tim found a way to connect with old Henry. Henry's situation with his estranged son resonated with Tim and gave him hope that if Henry is able to make amends with his son, there is still hope for him and Shane. The flashback of Tim hugging Shane was a pleasant surprise, and I can't wait for the next episode to see how this works out for them. People can say whatever they want, but Tim was amazing this episode. It's great to see Katie and Parker working at Mackey's, but one chef, one waitress, and two newbies, it's just a bit of stretch to wait on all those people. Just my opinion, but I always loved when the teenagers worked at Maggie's. The flying horse was funny, and his miraculous recovery due to Remy's companionship was phenomenal. Lady Picking Wildflowers was adorable. Loved how Lisa was trying to help those in need and even got Tim involved. I even loved Jack and Lisa's little argument and how they worked through their disagreements and made peace. I like it when Lisa is involved with other characters, not only Jack, and I hope they won't push her back to the kitchen in the upcoming episodes. Well said. One of the things I loved about this episode as well was how Rick had this wonderful little storyline with Lou being gone and him having to deal with the situation. I think, when we think about Rick, we think about, comedy and sassy remarks and all that kind of stuff. But while watching, it's just so nice to see that, especially during the season, that Rick or Aiden is capable of giving us a range of emotions and scenes and all that kind of stuff because yeah, we have this neurotic Rick at the beginning of the episode, which is like kind of what we've come to know him as. But then especially the great scene with Tim and Rick, Tim coaching Rick, we see these layers upon layers, and I just really appreciated the approach Aiden had for those scenes. It's just like the camera work, the editing, everything. It's just that the scene at the diner was perfect. And we have Tim and his sort of experience coming through. Like he's a coach at the rodeo school, but he also has experience at politics. But at the same time, he can kind of manipulate people sometimes. So he knows what he's doing in that way. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Not this time, at least. So I think it was just like a beautiful thing to witness that happening. And at the end of the episode when Rick is giving that speech, like I just love how confident he is and how he gets to be calm and collected, and it just works. And then later on when he's sitting at Lee's chair and the call happens, and I really think Rick is a great addition to the show, and I hope we get to see more of him as well, just like Lisa. Then we have a comment from Deb. I'm more than willing to apply a willing suspension of disbelief in order to enjoy a story, but the writers really pushed my limits this week. In what universe would the town of Hudson give two 13-year-old girls the authority to arrange temporary housing for evacuees? Where were all those town council members who gave Lou such a hard time during the fire? Katie and Parker had more than enough to do just serving food and beverages in a Maggie's filled to the brim with upset people. They would still have had the opportunity to interact with Rick and Tim. Yeah, I agree with this. I mean, Heartland has a lot of those moments where you're kind of like, I don't know if this is realistic. But in a way, the whole show is kind of a fantasy. So I'm always like, okay, let's not get too caught on this because then it annoys you and then you're not able to enjoy the story. So I always try to keep that in mind when stuff like this happens. But yeah. Then we have a comment from HL Horses. I really, really love this episode. First off, Scott's back, even if it was only for like 2 seconds. The flood scenes in the beginning were kind of intense. This is bad, but I laughed out loud when they helicoptered Biscuit and he was just dangling. Amy's slow motion running also made me laugh because it was so cheesy. Georgie fracturing her back is actually kind of serious, so hope we get to see some repercussion of that. Getting Biscuit out of the trailer was super well done and really showed how crazy the horse was because they were all getting thrown around and Jack got trucked. And oh my god, Lisa is out of the kitchen and actually doing stuff. When I saw her at the Dude Ranch, I was in shock. It was also weird to see her sit on the other side of the table. The Jack and Lisa stuff was phenomenal this episode, especially the scene where they make up after the argument. They always seem to fight about her traveling, but this time it seemed different, but I don't know why. Lisa and Tim at the Dude Ranch was one of the best scenes. Also, a Lisa and Katie moment finally. I love the little honey bunny thing. I love a Remy cameo, and Amy, Biscuit, and Remy in the field was very pretty and a classic Amy moment. One of my favorite scenes from the episode was Tim and Rick. Rick in Lou's chair was also pretty great. I also loved Tim's storyline and how it perfectly set up Shane for next week. I wasn't expecting a mention or that flashback, so I was pleasantly surprised. Literally been 8 years since he's even been mentioned. And then he actually called Shane. Can't wait for the next week. Yeah, the horse dangling thing, like it's kind of like in season 15 premiere when the horse was doing the circles and I just couldn't stop laughing, even though it wasn't like funny, but just something about the way, like imagine yourself driving somewhere and seeing a flying horse, like you'd think you'd be tripping or something. So yeah. I agree with that. As for the Georgie fracturing her back, I just thought maybe she'd had like a really bad head injury or something like that. But her fracturing her spine is interesting. And I'm hoping that it's setting up, Georgie's return and maybe her ditching the Olympics dream because I don't see that really going anywhere. This is just me wishing that she'll be back and we'll be seeing something different with her because her storyline was getting kind of boring to my taste. So I'm hoping they're switching it up. And if Alicia would be back, I'm sure she'd do a great job with it. So then a comment from Sharon, a very different episode of Heartland where it wasn't totally about the family. Happy to see Scott back, hoping this isn't the only time we see him. Loved the scene between Rick and Tim. I laughed at this scene. Remy being the start of the show and Lindy picking flowers was beautifully shot. Parker at times reminds me of a mini Tim, always looking at the negative. Not meaning any offense toward Ava, but I thought her acting with Tim was stiff. I could see similarities between Tim and Kyle Gunderson. Both walked away from their families. Lisa letting Jack know that her job is just as important as the ranch is to him. Well, that's how I saw it. All in all, I did enjoy the episode and actually teared up with the young couple losing nearly everything. Okay, I'm on the same bandwagon as everyone else. Can someone please turn on the lights? If they're going for a moody look, it ain't working. It's just too dark. Episode 5 looks promising. Tim seeing Shane again and Tim meeting Ezra. That should be interesting. Yeah, I was happy to see Scott back, even if it was just for a couple of scenes. I know sometimes, it's about actor availability and all that, but to me, even seeing those people like Fred in the previous episode, it keeps the Heartland universe feeling more real because even though we see them briefly, it's kind of like they're still there, but they're just doing their own thing when we're not seeing. So I really like that. As for Parker and Ava's acting, I kind of appreciate the way she does it. Just something about the way she's blunt and kind of cuts to the chase. Like there's something funny about that to me, and I mean that in the best way. So I enjoyed their scenes, but I can see why it's not for everyone. Then we have a comment from Smoking Holsters. Again, another episode I really enjoyed. I love the shows where Remy actually has to act as opposite to just being the well-behaved dog. The storyline with Remy, Winston, and Biscuit was great. Also loved the storyline with Emily and David. A bit heartbreaking, but seeing Amy, Lisa, and Jack step up to help them was great. I really like the great Tim redemption story. He's helping Henry reconnect with his son. The flashback with Shane was just good TV. And then helping Rick step up was one more step forward for Tim's character. One thing about this whole Shane scenario, I guess I understand that Tim and Shane had some sort of falling out. Not even sure about that, but I'll never wrap my head around Amy or Lou losing touch with their brother. It just doesn't fit either of their personalities, especially Amy, who built a real connection with Shane. It was nice seeing Scott, but his presence always begs the question, where the hell is Cass? Her and Peter's absence, though we know Gabe is finally on set, seems strange that there's been no contact with him and Katie since the show's really taken to using video like they did with Georgie and Lou. It was good to hear that Georgie is on the mend, but as I think I wrote last week, I think we're done seeing Alicia on the show. I do hope I'm wrong in this. I'm also missing Jade. Finally, Jack and Lisa. I'm so tired of this business. This is what Lisa does. It's been what she's done for 16 seasons. Lisa travels. My biggest problem is that this constant male whine is exactly what turned me off to Amy and Ty's relationship because in the end, I already know that Lisa will bend and give up. That's the show. It centers around the ranch, so Jack's not leaving, and we know in the end that means Lisa is staying. This constant male domination and bride at woe is me stuff is really getting old. I can honestly say that those only real husband-wife relationships, give and take, real understanding, supportive and actually talking things out is Tim and Jessica. Imagine Tim in a serious equal marriage. I'm here for it. Yeah, I'm wondering whatever happened between Tim and Shane, but I guess we'll find out next week. It would also be nice to see Shane actually back at Heartland, especially when Lou is back. So we would get to see him with Amy and Lou because, like he said, they're siblings, even though they didn't grow up together. I think there was those connective moments between them. I would really love to see how they would get along now that they're adults and have their own lives. Then we have a comment from Heartland Lisa PFC. Wow, this episode surprised me in a great way. I loved it. Maybe a long post over 2 comments. LOL. This episode showed such positivity toward Tim. It showed his character growth and the side to him that the Tim haters never seem to pick up on. I'm sure they will still find something from this episode to call him on. Yawn. I loved the interaction with Rick, Parker, and Katie, and then how Parker knew Tim was the man to help Rick with his speech. Tim, then knowing the speech failing could also have repercussions on Lou, gave him all he needed to help Rick. The interaction between Rick and Tim I just loved. That scene was just fantastic. Pretend you're Lou. Excuse me? That's even more terrifying. Tim also at the Dude Ranch again showing character growth, helping Henry reconnect with his son, which is making him do the same with Shane. This is a great lead up to the next week's episode. That scene with Henry reconnecting and Tim having a flashback moment to Shane was just amazing and also unexpected. Rick was just awesome in this episode. I loved him having a main role in this way. The facial expressions Aiden puts into his character just always make me laugh. Absolutely love it. I love seeing more about Rick and learning about his character. This episode actually made me forget that he's only been in the show since season 14. Feels like he's been here longer. Next, Jack and Lisa. This is why we need more of these two. I loved everything. I even loved their disagreement. Why? Because it showed real life couples not agreeing but resolving it. Jack telling Lisa how what she sees and hears is just him missing her when she's away, but also telling her how proud he is of her. Couple goals. Nice to see a couple communicate through a disagreement. Also, the scene with Lisa and David showed just how great Lisa can be as a character, even without Jack. We need more of Lisa in this way. The scenes with Biscuit and Remy too were cute. It's nice to see Remy involved in a storyline in this way and tied to the story together nicely. While talking about Biscuit, I will admit I did have a giggle at the flying horse at the beginning. They say pigs can't fly, but horses can. Haha. I do wish we got to see more of the Georgie storyline with her accident, etc. But then I totally get it's to cover Michelle's maternity leave, so for once I will forget them. It was nice to see Scott, albeit briefly. I guess you couldn't have a horse rescue, etc. without a vet, so it made sense. Shame we don't see more of Scott though. The one last thing to note is the supporting characters in this episode were fantastic. They really did play their part and help pull this episode together. When hearing about the flawed storyline and evacuees, I was wondering how it would work, but hats off to the writers and casting, it was pulled off perfectly. I could have imagined David and his wife, sorry, forgot her name, it was Emily, being featured again as they fit that well. Organic fruit and vegetable supplier from Mackey's somewhere down the line? Then last but not least, Stephanie said, Scott's back. His scenes were brief, but it was good seeing him. The whole Georgie storyline was resolved way too quickly. I wish they had played that out more and not it be fixed over a phone call. I wish we could have seen a few scenes with Lou and Georgie at the hospital or something. I find Heartland tends to do that with medical stuff. Like when Amy was injured, she was basically better within a day. Aw, Remy's bond with Biscuit was adorable. Her keeping him company, the back and forth between the two separate fights, Jack and Lisa, the couple from the flood. I really like how those were shot and how they paralleled each other. I hate seeing Jack and Lisa fight, but I can understand why Jack's upset. He hates seeing Lisa leave all the time, and as soon as Lisa comes home, she has to leave again. Definitely puts a strain on a relationship. I can't imagine doing long distance, but I'm glad they were able to work through that argument and will hopefully communicate more when one of them is feeling hurt. Tim, Parker, Rick, Katie dynamic. Finally, I've been wanting this for 2 seasons, more specifically Tim and Rick interacting. I need more of this as soon as possible. You hear me, Heartland writers? Tim and Henry. The storyline between the two of them is definitely setting up for Tim and Shane reunion in the upcoming episode. Tim reuniting father and son was a really sweet moment. Their hug on the dock was really sweet, and the flashback to the earlier season with Tim hugging Shane topped that moment. I'm looking forward to seeing them together again even more. I just hope their storyline gets this justice it deserves. It's been years in the making. Tim called Shane? Aw, he's trying. That makes me so emotional. Rick in Lou's chair, and then the laughing emoji with the tears coming out of their eyes. He looked way too comfortable in it. But for real, he handled the situation with class, with the help of Tim. It was nice seeing him step up in a leadership role for the town. Love seeing Lisa more involved in this episode and not just seeing her in the kitchen. At the beginning, when they showed the flood during the news portion, was that real footage from Alberta, flooded in the past? But it would be interesting if they picked up certain aspects of what happened in the past during this episode. Yeah, I was wondering about that footage as well because I don't think they set all that up. So I think they must have come from somewhere. But then I was also wondering, like, if you were a person who was actually involved in those real life floods, how would you feel about seeing it in a show like this? Like, maybe not the worst show to show it on, but at the same time, those events were probably very traumatic. So would that be kind of a jump scare to see yourself or your house in that kind of situation? I don't know. Just something that crossed my mind. Okay, so that's all your comments this week. And it's that part of the episode where we look into tomorrow's episode. So let's take a look. Tomorrow's episode, airing on November 6th, is called Into the Wild. The description for the episode says Amy helps a unique animal from an abandoned zoo. Tim joins Jessica in New York for her art show while trying to fix a past mistake. Jack and Lisa work through difficulties in their relationship. So, looks like another great episode, and I can't wait to talk with you again next week. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you again next week. Till then, keep your noses clean and your powder dry, as they say. See ya.